I wanted to start at the beginning of the journey rather than thinking about what a specific brand would do. We went a little bit wider, so we got fewer sample size from each individual airline to do a deep dive on any one. And as someone has spent way more time on and waiting for planes, I wanted to dig a little bit more into what may be an outlier here among industries with airline having one of the lowest scores. So the when I look at the full range of scores across industries, for the new industries it was 59 to 70, airlines was at 57. And I wanted to dig in to understand how the pillars may be different between airlines and others. So um, across all the industries that we measured, old and new wave, dependability, when you include financial services and tech and telecom and media and entertainment from the first wave, dependability gets even higher than it was before. Still the highest for airlines, but what stuck out to me was looking at that customer first and responsiveness as being super high important relative to others, and kind of wondered why that was, why those two drivers would have a bigger impact than they do on the average industry um, for airlines. And I think some of it has to do with customers expect airlines to have more control over the kind of things that go into customer first and responsiveness than the attributes that make up dependability. In other words, trust gets more of a bump when they succeed and are more penalized for failure when they do or don't do things like go above and beyond for customers or quickly resolve issues relative to other industries. So now you see it. I'm going to take a small pause here as you've all been waiting for. This is the obligatory performance versus important two by two you've all been waiting for. You can all breathe a collective sigh of relief and pause. You've seen it. So, harkening back to the last slide, I mentioned that dependability is relatively lower for airlines than it is across lots of other industries, but it's still number one. So the performance on dependability. So as we look at the y-axis, dependability, um, and most of the other factors are very similar in terms of performance across that horizontal. Um, but what stuck out to me was that when I looked at data digging into these, that dependability trailed other industries on performance by 5 percentage points. So um, most of these are pretty similar to other industries, but dependability showed the biggest gap to all of the average of all other industries. Now, you could argue that airlines have a higher bar there because other industries don't face weather problems and regulatory problems and air traffic control. But still, I think as you look at the verbatims on the right-hand side, customers know it when they see it in terms of what makes an airline dependable versus not. So people have a reference point for what makes up dependability versus what does not. So next, I wanted to understand, uh, as I mentioned, the not enough sample to dig into any single airline individually. I wanted to understand how performance may differ by cohorts of airlines. So we developed three different cohorts of airlines. On the left-hand side, specialty/regional airlines, Hawaiian and Alaska. In the center, legacy airlines, Delta and United and American. And on the right-hand side, Southwest and Spirit. And you can see that the overall trust scores, which are in the bubbles 71, 61, and 46 respectively, differ pretty dramatically based on the cohort of the airline. And I think that they differ relatively similar to what my expectations would be and others that I've seen. As we dig into the data that goes underneath that, the pillar performance, you see pretty dramatic gaps from the average between the specialty regional airlines doing much better than average, the legacy airlines doing a bit better than average, and the budget airlines doing much worse than average. These are weighted averages, so don't try to do the math exactly across um, for each of the three different cohorts of airlines. So I think that the something about the regional airlines and what they're doing is clearly better. The biggest gaps there are on the transparency and customer first. And I think that both Hawaiian and Alaska are pretty well known for how friendly their staff is, what they try to do to make each experience memorable, which is kind of what travel should be, and how well they get ahead of delays and those types of things. So finally, I drilled more into wanted to take a look at different generational cohorts and understand if or what may have been different across them. So blessedly, I'm not going to bombard you with any more numbers, but looking at just some summing up differences by generational cohorts and how we may wind up making different recommendations based on the generation, this across airline industries. When we looked at Gen Z, for example, some of the things that stuck out looking at the driver analysis and looking at the verbatim comments was they care about airlines avoiding manipulative or misleading practices. And because of that, we may recommend that an airline focus on dispelling fears of hidden fees or greenwashing. And for boomers, and no, I'm not quite old enough to be a boomer, but despite looking so, we focus on loyalty to a dependable brand, and therefore we might recommend that we emphasize on-time performance and a valuable loyalty program. So what does kind of all of this mean, I think, as I think about what I would do if I was sitting in the seat of someone making decisions around if or how to measure trust. I think it reinforced for me that understanding your trust score among target audience is a critical first step in prioritizing resources to build trust. Testing your brand among your top competitors and benchmarking against the overall category trust score is a good thing to do. Identifying the relative importance of the six pillars of trust for your category and identifying the gaps for your brand would be an important part of the steps. I'd want to target the drivers within the pillar you want to improve operationally and or with targeted messaging and figure out how far you think you can increase your performance there and then measure slash track improvement over time for consideration and loyalty as you can build trust for your brand.